Uh, Now, everybody does remember that these are worth points, and getting them correct is worth points. And okay, okay. Right. So this again is going to be the carbohydrates. When we're talking about the saccharides, we have here monosaccharides, meaning one, right? Disaccharide is going to be two of those units then. Oligosaccharide is going to be 3 to 8, 9 of those units. And so you have 3 or to 9 monosaccharides joined together. And that will give you an oligosaccharide, kind of like a oligarchy. Now, the polysaccharide is going to be many, and so that's greater than 9. Okay? It can go, your book says up to 10,000, but it can go way beyond that. Okay? It can go a whole tree. So you can make a whole tree, you could make a spool miles long of this material. You can make massive polymers, okay, that you can barely imagine the length of. So let's talk a bit about fiber in our diet. This is going to be where we're talking about polysaccharide. Now, dietary fibers are actually going to be carbohydrates that we cannot digest with our own enzymes. There's actually a few different ways for animals to be able to digest these, but we do not have those. Okay? Which is actually probably a good thing, because the animal you all probably know that can digest this material is the cow, and they know how they digest this material. They do, but they have to throw it up and re-eat it 4 times. So I'm a little bit thankful I'm not a cow. I would prefer not to digest it over that. I'm good. So the soluble fibers are going to mix with water. These are actually going to form a gel-like substance in the stomach and digestive tract, of course, past the stomach. This is going to give a sense of fullness. This actually slows sugar and cholesterol absorption in your bloodstream. Because they form that gel-like substance, they typically form this down in your stomach area, because that's where you first have like actual available water for it to really become soluble in. They typically form this gel around the other stuff you ate. And so they trap that, and then you can't digest this matrix that moves along in your digestive tract, and so you only get a part of what you ate. Okay? This is why a lot of times when they're trying to like lower blood cholesterol levels, they're like, hey, you need to reduce your sugar content in your meals. They recommend you eat things that have a lot of soluble fiber, right? You can actually simulate this. So you can drink soluble fiber or eat it along with whatever you're eating. You just have to interlace it in between. And then it will also cause you to digest less. It's like a dieting trick that people used to play on super extreme diets that were usually really unhealthy. Yeah. Now, it does give you a sense of fullness. Some of the foods that are high in soluble fibers are going to be things like oatmeal. This is why oatmeal, if you get like the stone cut oatmeal that has a lot of fiber in it, surprisingly does not increase your blood sugars as much as you'd think, even though it is a grain. Legumes like peas, beans, lentils does this a lot. Apples, psyllium husks, carrots. Again, another thing that you see a lot of diabetics eating, carrots, despite the fact that they're just chock full of sugar. So you shouldn't theoretically be able to eat carrots as a diabetic, but you get a very small amount of that sugar, much less than you would normally. Okay. And so that helps. Fruit pectins, these are going to be used to make things like jellies. These typically contain soluble fibers, and so that's actually one of the ways you can make jellies. And that's what we're talking about in terms of soluble fiber. When I'm talking about like that soluble, you can tell it's not quite dissolved right, is jellies. Jelly's a good example of that. Now, everybody knows what I'm talking about when I'm talking about jellies. Okay, so insoluble fiber. This is not going to mix with water. It does play a critical role in your digestive tract, but it does not actually mix with the water. Okay. Now, insoluble fiber has a major laxative effect. It actually adds bulk to the diet, and it prevents constipation in your diet. Polysaccharide cellulose is an insoluble fiber. And so if you've ever eaten like plants, a lot of plants have this because they have plant stalks. And so that's going to be cellulose. Kind of like eating bark, but not as solid. Okay. Some of the sources of these are going to be whole grains. Specifically, they need that outer casing shell on them to have significant amounts of this. Seeds, brown rice the brown rice portion, by the way, is the fiber portion. It's the cellulose portion. The white rice is you've cracked it and thrown out the husk completely. So the cabbage and vegetable stalks and skins, these all have a lot of insoluble fiber. You pretty much know what I'm talking about if you've lived a life and eaten. You've all experienced it. When, oh, that looks exactly like what I ate before. Mostly I didn't do a lot to that. Now, the insoluble fiber is kind of interesting because your digestive system, has anybody seen what a digestive system looks like? Yeah. Anybody not seen that? Okay. Some of you are looking at me a little. Okay. So what it kind of looks like is it looks like this. Okay. And so it has these like cilium that come in so it can absorb material better and increase the surface area. Now, one of the problems with that is that when you have material moving through here, right? If you had something like this that was like a kitchen tool, it'd be a dang mess all the time, wouldn't it? Okay. And so you don't have, a brush, somebody's cleaning with a brush and soap and water in there, do you? So when you eat insoluble fibers, it basically acts like a squeegee in this. And your intestines move like an earthworm to force the things through. And it'll kind of just scrape stuff out on you. It's one of the reasons it has that laxative effect. Yeah. And if you ever don't eat fiber for a while, then eat fiber, you will notice that it smells very, very different. Yeah. Because you have a lot of material in you that just doesn't move otherwise. Yeah. Anyways, I'm not talking. Go on the next slide. Does everybody understand the fibers so far? Okay, those are going to be polysaccharides. Okay, very long saccharide structure. They're usually fibers because that polysaccharide structure. Now, the ethanol, this is one of the simplest members of families of organic compounds that are known as alcohols. This is the 2-carbon alcohol. Ethanol is the one that you would see in that's produced through fermentation typically. It's going to be like sugars and grains and fruits that are fermented to produce ethanol. And ethanol is going to be the alcohol that's present in things like liquors, beers, wines. Everybody understands what I'm talking about. Okay. This is distinct from things like rubbing alcohol or wood alcohol, which are actually, more toxic. Ethanol is toxic, by the way. You're just poisoning yourself the right amount. It's literally why people drink it. So they can poison themselves just the right amount. Okay? In case you're wondering, yes, all the other alcohols also do the same effect. They would also make you drunk, but they also destroy parts of your body, your eyes, liver, etc., and cause a lot of health problems. Not that ethanol doesn't cause any health problems. A lot more health problems. Again, this is going to be your main additive and alternative fuel blends. There's about 10% in current fuel blends, up to 10%, I should say, in current fuel blends. Typically, alternative fuel blends will have a 15 to 90% alcohol. This is something we've really been moving away from now. But for example, California spent tens of billions of dollars trying to implement this like 10, 20 years ago. It did not work at all. But in fact, they had to poison the stations for it because people kept coming up and it's a whole thing. You can look it up. It's actually quite fascinating, and the normal California government mismanagement stuff. Yeah, it's its own unique case. um, so the funny thing about this is like it did not save any amount of pollution at all. It burns cleaner, but to make ethanol, you have to actually do all the pollution before. So they basically did all the pollution for you and gave you something, which is just eh, just damn silly is what it was. They've still kept some of that. Now they put up to 10% ethanol in your fuel, and they do that so that they can increase the octane rating. So it's the proper octane rating to burn in your engines. Okay, at least that's why they say. The reality probably being more along the lines if they had to do something with the corn. So. Now, alcohols are going to be classified by the number of alkyl groups attached to that carbon atom that's attached to the alcohol. The alcohol can only ever be attached to one carbon at a time because oxygens want two bonds, right? One of the bonds is already hydrogen, then the other bond is the only one available, isn't it? Okay? And so the primary alcohol, this is going to be one where your carbon that's attached to, right there, is attached to one other carbon. A secondary alcohol, that's the carbon the alcohol is attached to, is attached to two. A tertiary is going to be where you have your alcohol attached to this carbon here, and now there's three carbons on it. Okay? And so that's primary, tertiary, secondary. Now, monosaccharides contain primary and secondary alcohols. And so we're going to see examples of both of these in our monosaccharides. Okay, so I actually have a really funny and interesting story for this. You guys will not have ever had that on your bingo card, that this is going to be a story from chemistry, okay? So here we have some examples of the functional groups you would see in these monosaccharides, okay? And so these are aldehydes right here, right? I'm going to start with the not really that interesting or funny ones. It's still a little interesting. This is benzaldehyde. It's that, see how that's very shiny? That's that, okay? That waxy substance that you see on like cherries and stuff. That's that. Yeah. One of the reasons why people oftentimes don't like cherries because they tend to have that waxy substance. Some people don't like that. But okay, right here, this is formaldehyde. It's not the brain. That's being just a human brain. Okay, it has been preserved in preservative fluid, which is formaldehyde, so that won't rot. Okay, and so it's a preserved brain specimen. Right now, okay, so let's say you die, you go to the mortuary, right? And the mortician's going to have to work on your body. Okay, and so what ends up happening is oftentimes the mortician doesn't have enough cooling for everybody, and ends up using something like formaldehyde. They don't use formaldehyde much anymore. There's still ones that do, but mostly it's not that. But back in the day, they used to use formaldehyde, okay, all the time. And so if you look at any horror movie, right, what do you always know about, what do you always see about that graveyard guy, that person that's in the mortuary? Okay, the mortician. What's always the features of the mortician? Gaunt, thin, hollow cheeks, right? Tired looking, red eyes, kind of like lethargic. What do you want? Bent over, right? Kind of gravelly voice, can't talk very well, and oftentimes very angry and like standoffish, right? And so you may notice this also sounds like something else. Red eyes, standoffish, angry, trying to hurt you. Headaches all the time. It sounds a bit like a house that has like demons or spirits, right? So those are all the hallmarks of formaldehyde poisoning. Those are formaldehyde poisoning. So the morticians were being poisoned by the gases that are being vented by the formaldehyde. Okay? And so they had all those features because it's formaldehyde poison. Now, an interesting little factoid is this isn't a very uncommon gas in several different types of plastics that are commonly used in the construction industry. And so, have you guys ever heard of off gassing? You guys ever been in like a new car or new house? And it has a very distinct smell to it, right? People really like the new car smell and the new house smell, actually. Part of the reason they like that is aldehydes are like super common biological molecules, oftentimes found in things like flowers and sugars and things you like. And so your body's kind of normally goes aldehyde, yum, I like this. Unfortunately, not all are actually good for you. Many of them are poisonous for you. And so what happens is if you use poorly made construction materials, oftentimes not uncommon, right? Uh, this happens a lot with materials from China because they're in shipping containers oftentimes, and so they don't off gas as much. They're not just like set outside to then go to their next shipping, and they don't have open shipping when they're shipping it. They have to put them in containers because they're going to be out in the ocean. So what you oftentimes end up seeing is these materials end up being used for new houses. People move into the house or remodeling or whatever they're doing, and then it off gases formaldehyde into the house, and then the people inside the house have red eyes. They're tired all the time. They can't sleep properly. They have headaches, like pounding headaches. It really hurt, like somebody's knocking on their brain and soul. And then they argue with each other, and they're mean, like nothing he's ever done before or she's ever done before, right? And so what does this start sounding like? A possession, right? It sounds like a demon or poltergeist is possessing. And so the leading cause of people thinking they're being possessed and calling in, usually they try to call the priest, but most of the priests don't show up for possessions. They'll actually test for this first. If you call the Vatican, by the way, they'll actually send out a team and test for this. If you have any sort of evidence that they'd send anybody out. Or they'll at least tell you, hey, you should get your house tested first. And so that's actually formaldehyde poisoning again. Yeah. So who had that on their bingo cards? That chemistry would be talking about possession by demons.
So does carbon monoxide, sorry, it's kind of different. Carbon monoxide poisoning, does that like make you just like fearful? What?
So it reduces the amount of oxygen going to your brain. And so it can do a lot of things to you, actually. You can start hallucinating. Anybody ever like ran so much that they couldn't breathe anymore? Or like climbed mountains or anything? So if you've ever done any of that stuff where you've been short on oxygen to your brain, carbon monoxide blood binds the oxygen carrier in your blood. And so you literally cannot, no matter how much you breathe, get enough oxygen. And so you can get all the effects of a pounding headache, lethargy, of course, but you can also get hallucinations, and so it can do a lot to you. There's a lot of things carbon monoxide poisoning causes. An interesting factoid, by the way, is geologically that happens quite often to like whole towns, and is one of like the towns disappearing reasons, because like a geological event will vent carbon monoxide out into the surroundings, and then it binds to people's blood, and then they'll all pass out for 10-15 minutes, and if they weren't getting enough oxygen, those people all die. So if it's bad enough, they'll all die. If not, they all like faint and have hallucinations, and like very common reason for people to think like the world's ending. God has smote us. Because oftentimes also fiery things happen around them, or very interesting ecological events like the water's turning red. Pretty common event that happens alongside it. So it can be quite something. There's some really crazy geological and biological events happening. This is ketones, by the way. The one you're most familiar with probably is going to be butadiene. Butane-dione. And this is going to be the flavoring of butter. Okay? So if you actually eat real butter, this is going to be the flavor. This is not necessarily the flavor of artificial butter. There's actually a whole host of compounds that will all trick your tongue into thinking it's eating butter. Some of them are actually pretty toxic, but mostly those have been removed from use. Okay, and they've been banned. This is pyruvate, by the way. You guys may have heard of ketone bodies. This is the thing that's usually making ketone bodies and what ketone bodies are being digested into. This is the first energy molecule that goes into the other energy pathways that we'll talk about later. Very important molecule in your body. Very biologically relevant. One of the things we need to keep in mind is this is aldehydes right here. See, it has a hydrogen on one side. Okay. And then you can either have a carbon on the other side or not. Doesn't matter. But that's an aldehyde. Okay. A ketone, on the other hand, has carbons on both sides. Okay. So ketone's going to have a carbon on both sides of that carbonyl carbon-oxygen double bond. Now, when we're talking about sugars, this is an example of a sugar with an aldehyde. Over here we have a ketone. And so they're actually named differently depending on what is bonded to them. So if you have an aldehyde, then you're going to have an aldose. The ose portion saying, hey, I'm a saccharide. The ald portion saying I'm an aldehyde. Okay. Ketose is going to have a ketone, and so that's going to be a ketone sugar. Okay. Now you can also designate the number of carbons. So for example, if we have a 3-carbon sugar, we're going to have a triose. So if it's a monosaccharide with 3 carbons, that's a triose. If it has 4 carbons, that's going to be a tetrose. 5 carbons is a pentose, and 6 carbons is a hexose. You'll notice again, it's the exact same numbering we talked about before, right? There's no difference there. The only difference is we have ose at the end because they're sugars. Okay? They're the monosaccharides. You can combine these different terminologies. So over here we have an aldehyde with 6 carbons, and so that's an aldohexose. Right here we have a ketone here, and this is going to have 5 carbons, and so that is a ketopentose. Okay. You could have, for example, aldotriose. Okay. Now, carbon atoms of tetrahedral geometry, these are going to have 4 different atoms or groups attached to them. They're going to be chiral centers. So one of the things you may have noticed when you're looking up here is this carbon here has 4 different groups attached to it, doesn't it? See, it's different on 4 different sides. And so that carbon right there, that was chiral, wasn't it? Okay. This carbon, also chiral, isn't it? How about that one? Yeah, same thing, isn't it? It's also chiral. How about that one? Nope. Only 3 different things attached to it, right? And so that cannot be chiral. That has to be achiral. Okay. How about that one? It has 2 hydrogens, right? It has 2 of the same thing. It has to be achiral, not chiral. What is that sound? A bird or bat or somebody playing music? Now, if you have a single chiral center, then that single chiral center can have 2 stereoisomers. These 2 stereoisomers would be called enantiomers of each other. And so a single chiral center would have 2 enantiomers of each other. Okay. Now, what if you have more than one? So you have one chiral center. If it's flipped, that's going to be an enantiomer, right? If you have more than one, then you're going to get stereoisomers from every time you flip it, aren't you? So this right here has 1, 2, 3, 4 4 different chiral centers. Can everybody see it okay? Okay, so if you rotate these chiral centers, what do you notice? Again, we have 4 different things attached around here. See those different colors? Showing you the 4 different things attached around those 2 chiral centers. Now, if you flip those, what you're going to get is every single one of those chiral centers can generate its own stereoisomer. And so how you figure that out is that it's going to be 2 to the power of n, where n is the number of the chiral centers you have on that molecule. Okay? That's going to give you the number of stereoisomers that can exist for that. And so, for example, we had 4 before, right? And so we do 2 to the 4th power. When we take powers of something, that's the number of times you times it by itself, right? So 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Okay. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 8 is 16. And so we have 16 possible stereoisomers for this glucose, which is what I was talking about before. Okay? And so that's 16 possible stereoisomers. Only one of these stereoisomers is actually our preferred energy source, the one that's used for our brain exclusively and primarily used by our heart. Okay? So Fischer projections. Now, before I get any more into these stereoisomers, I need a way of easily talking about these, okay? And so Fischer projections are going to be like what we saw before. These were all being laid out so that they looked like Fischer projections, okay? That's why they're being laid out that way, is so you could compare the different chiralities, different enantiomers, different stereoisomers between the two, and go, oh yeah, I see where that changes. Right? Okay, so one of the things we need to talk about, though, is that in a Fischer projection, what we're going to have is we're going to have a horizontal line, and this horizontal line is going to be coming out towards you. Okay? So anything on the horizontal line is coming out towards you. Anything on the vertical line is going to be going away from you. Okay? And so the best way to sort of think of these is each of these Fischer projections is going to be like this. Right? And they're going to be kind of making a circle where the things that are on the horizontal line are coming out towards you in every direction. Okay? Okay, now, the carbons in a Fischer projection, we're just going to show them as cross lines. Anytime a line crosses, those are going to be the chiral carbons. Okay? And that way we don't have to talk about carbons and figure out where they are, and there's not, write them out. Saves a lot of time. Okay? Now, the last thing we have to talk about is there's going to be designated different types of sugars. These are going to be D and L. This D and L designation, this is actually based on the Fischer projection positioning of glyceraldehyde, and it's going to be used as a reference molecule for that designation. Okay? So for the glyceraldehyde, that's the only one where it is D and L have actual meaning for everything and mean what they're supposed to mean. Okay? Every other sugar is going to use this terminology, but it's just going to be telling you which enantiomer you have. Okay? Which of the mirror images do I have? Okay? That's all it's really going to say to you. Okay? It can't be really broadened out to this always means this thing other than it's which enantiomer you have. Okay? If you were to look up this DNL, you'd see that stands for dexolevatory, and that means right-handed, left-handed in German. Interesting little factoid. When this originally was done, this research, the Germans were the it group for chemistry, and they were doing all the chemistry development. This corresponds to the time just before World War II, which is why World War II happened and the Germans did the things they did, a lot of this shit. They invented something during this time, which is heavily involved with stereochemistry, which is they invented the drug methamphetamine. Okay? And so in World War II, the reason they had the Blitzkrieg was it was literally 3 days of guys running around with gear on their back with no rest, guess what they were taking? E-meth. Yeah, they were popping meth pills constantly. And so when they actually ended up conquering all the people around them, it was an army full of meth addicts that were in control of Europe for like several years with guns and tanks and bombs. So I don't know what to tell you that that one was not okay. Yeah. So imagine LA and New York with the people on the street there, meth addicts, and then you're like, they all have tanks and bombs and guns. And that's World War II. Oh, God. Just not right. So, anyways, it actually has to do with like how the light's bent, and in glyceraldehyde, it actually does have to do with that. For all the other sugars, it doesn't. In case you're wondering why I said like the light is bent, has anybody ever had polarized lenses? Or ever heard of them? Like sunglasses? Okay. So if you, and you can still play with this actually if you use your camera, your computer screen. What you can do is like you can rotate your camera and your computer screen. And what you'll notice is there's like certain angles where your screen gets really dark and certain angles where it gets much brighter. Okay. Same thing happens when you use a polarized lens. And in a polarized lens, light that hits a surface tends to orient like this towards you. And so the polarized lenses doesn't let that light through. And then the lights like this, which is usually the stuff directly coming off of things, is what lets through. So that's what that is. When you have chirality, it actually twists light. Okay? Depending on your chirality. Okay, so these are the wedge and dash. This is, again, these dashes are going away from you, right? Into the plane of the projector. When you're talking about these wedges here, they're coming out towards you. Okay? And so those ones are coming out towards you, right? This right here is going to be a Fisher projection. Again, this is glyceraldehyde we're actually looking at here, so you can see the actual thing it's based on. And so what we see here is these are the horizontal. And what I want you to see here is this OH, it's coming out towards you, right? This H, it's coming out towards you, okay? These ones over here, these carbons, they're going away from you, okay? Okay, and so this is what it looks like in terms of a ball and stick model. See how it looks like that? Okay. Now, notice for glyceraldehyde, the OH being on the right side is going to give you the D-glyceraldehyde. Okay? The OH being on the left side gives you the L-glyceraldehyde. On the nice hand, English and German have that in common. Left hand, L. Okay? Unfortunately, German has D for right hand, but it's still fairly easy to remember because you just got to get one. Okay. Now, this is always going to be for these D and Ls. Do you see this carbon here that has the aldehyde ketone, the carbonyl? In this case, an aldehyde. Okay, it's always going to be the chiral center that's furthest from that. That's going to give you your D and L for every sugar. Okay? So, see, this is the furthest one here in terms of chiral centers, and so that is right side, and that's a D. So that's D-glyceraldehyde. Left side, for the OH, that's going to be an L-glyceraldehyde. Yes, in case you're wondering, if you've ever been to a nutritional supplement store and seen DL something, or L something, D something, or looked at your drug containers, that's the same terminology. Now, again, this is the enantiomers of each other, right? They're mirror images of each other. They're non-superimposed. Okay? And so those are enantiomers. So D sugars are, again, going to have the OH on the right side right here. Okay? And it's going to be the last chiral center. Can everybody see it okay? So here we have our carbonyl, right? An aldehyde in this case. We go the furthest chiral center from it. The OH is on the right, and so that's your D-glucose. Okay? Everybody okay with that so far? All right, now, if we have a D-glucose here, okay, what would happen if we took all of those H and OHs and just flipped them all? What would happen? That would be a mirror image, wouldn't it? Yeah. And so if you take your D-glucose, which is right here, and we flip all of these OHs and H right here, then we're going to get the L-glucose. Okay? So we just flip all those chiral centers, we get the enantiomer of it. Right? If you're trying to draw an enantiomer, it's kind of the easiest thing in the world because you just copy everything but the H and OHs on these, and then you just flip all of them. That's it. Everybody see that okay? So if the OH is on the right in one, you flip it to the left on the other. And so then you get the other enantiomer. Mirror image, right? Non-superimposable. Okay, now, I said 16, didn't I? And then I'm only going on a single enantiomer, right? So we've talked about the enantiomers, right? We have the D and L glucose. You may have noticed, though, that I haven't said anything about all the other sugars you probably know about, right? And so you've probably heard of a bunch of other sugars. I haven't talked about them all, okay? And so what we need to talk about next is the stereoisomers that are not enantiomers. So these are going to be called diisomers, okay? They're going to be the stereoisomers where instead of flipping all of them, you flip one or two, okay? You flip a couple. So you don't flip them all, but you flip at least one, okay? Okay, so this is D-glucose. Notice these are all Ds because they have the OH down here on the right side, okay? And so what you're going to see here is the D-glucose, if we flip this group right here, see that? We just flipped that group. Then we're going to have D-galactose. That's actually going to be a different sugar, okay? If we take and flip two of these, see we flip two of those from the D-glucose here, the blue ones, then we're going to get D-tellose, okay? And those are going to be diisomers of that glucose, okay? So they're not going to be mirror images of each other, but they're still going to be stereoisomers of each other. We just flipped not all of the chiral carbons centers, okay? So we flipped some number of them, not all. Right? You can flip one, that's this case here. You can flip two. You could flip three. Just can't flip all four. Okay. So this right here is a listing of all the different sugars. And I have listed all 16 stereoisomers on here for you. Okay? Is there 16 down here, though? Huh. Yeah, just looking at it, you might not think there is, right? Anybody got a mirror with them? Take out your mirror, point it here, and you get the other 8. Okay? So these are the Ds. See that? I've given you all the Ds here. If you just flip all of these H and OHs, you're going to get the Ls, aren't you? So I've given you everything that matters. Okay? All you got to do is just flip all these, and you get the Ls. These are, there's the D-glyceraldehyde, by the way. It only has the one chiral center, and so it's just D-glyceraldehyde. Over here, we have 2 chiral centers, and so we get 4 total. 2 of the Ds, 2 of the Ls, right? And so on down. Okay? And so that's what they all look like. This is their names. You may recognize some of these, like D-ribose. Actually, some of you might actually recognize threose. It's pretty common in like drugs and stuff and medications. You see this name pop up quite a bit. Anyways, there's mannose, glucose, of course, right there. This is the galactose. There's xylose. Okay, So, glucose. This is going to be the most abundant monosaccharide. It's probably the most important overall. It's found in nature, and it's going to be called glucose, dextrose, commonly referred to as blood sugar, because it's the one that you're going to use and have most available. Okay. It's found in fruits, vegetables, corn syrup, all of those. It can be broken down inside cells, produce energy. This is going to be through a process that's called glycolysis, literally glucose, glyco, right? Lysis, breaking. And so breaking glucose. Okay. This is going to make most of the energy. This is going to be the energy usage that's going to be used in your brain. Now, diabetics actually have difficulty getting glucose from the bloodstream into their cells so that they can actually perform glycolysis. And this is one of the reasons they have to monitor their blood glucose levels so closely, is they can actually starve to death even though they have blood glucose in their eating. It just doesn't get taken into cells and used. And so then they can go unconscious. And now, the glucose is going to be a sugar unit in the sucrose. That's table sugar. It's also in lactose, which is the disaccharides. And that's the milk sugar. Amylose, amylopectin, glycogen, and cellulose. Everybody knows glycogen, right? Okay, it's the sugar storage in humans. Okay, it's that stuff if you feel like around your muscles, and you feel there's like something that doesn't feel quite like fat. Okay, that's glycogen. Not muscle, not fat. It's a little bit harder than the muscle, but it's not the real solid if you like flex your muscles that your muscles would be. Okay. Also beer bellies. So if you ever had a beer belly or seen somebody with a beer belly, it's like more solid than fat, right? Yeah. That's the glycogen. Cellulose, like plant stalks. So galactose, this can be found combined with glucose in the disaccharide lactose. This is going to be the one that's present in dairy products and milk, like lactose intolerance. Galactose has a single chiral center, carbon 4. It's arranged opposite of that of glucose. The diastereomers that differ in just one chiral center are called epimers of each other. So glucose and galactose are epimers of each other. The body can, in fact, convert galactose into glucose. The enzyme that does this is called epimerase because it's the enzyme that turns one epimer into another. And so epimerase. Mannose, this is going to be monosaccharide found most notably in cranberries. It's actually not readily absorbed by the body. And so when you eat cranberries, you'll see that like a lot of people with diabetes will eat cranberries. And you'll see that like they don't increase your blood sugars by anywhere near what you would think they do. Because most of that sugar is actually going to, in fact, pass through you. It's going to get dissolved in your bloodstream and then pass through you, which means that it comes out mostly in your urinary tract. And this is thought to help with urinary infections, so urinary tract infections, UTIs. It's oftentimes recommended that people that get UTIs drink cranberry juice. Whether that actually works or not, I really can't say. Okay. There's a lot of evidence kind of both ways. The evidence for it is pretty questionable. So I really couldn't tell you which way that one's going to go. Right? Maybe one of you can do a huge study one day, send it back to me, and be like, Dr. Clausen, this is the results. Okay? I have a funny feeling it's going to be kind of hard. You need a large body of people tightly controlled in their diets, which is pretty tough. Now, fructose. So this is the ketose fructose. It's going to be found in fruit sugar or levulose. It's found in fruits, vegetables, honey. These are other names for it, by the way. In combination with glucose, it gives you the disaccharide sucrose, which is table sugar or cane sugar. Fructose is going to be your sweetest monosaccharide. It has 1.5 times sweeter than table sugar. And so this is why it's commonly used in the United States to make sweet drinks, is because you can use less sugar to make the drink, and it'll still taste the same amount of sweetness. Okay. It's not an epimer of glucose. Fructose, however, can be broken down for energy production in the body. So it's a very, very common sugar that your body has learned to convert to glucose and use. Okay. Now, one of the kind of interesting things is this has been like a recent thing people have been talking about and heard about. You guys heard about like the Mexican Coke debate? Yeah. Okay. So they do taste different. I mean, I've tasted them; they taste different. It's probably not because of the cane sugar. There's actually a different sugar that is in small amounts in one versus the other, and it gives a slightly different taste to them, probably. But the interesting thing and why it's a debate is that Coca-Cola is quite acidic. When you put the disaccharide sucrose, i.e., cane sugar, in to an acid, it breaks down over time. And so, if you were to do this and bottle it up and serve it fresh, you would have cane sugar in there. Not that cane sugar actually tastes that much different than regular sugar, but it'd be a little bit less sweet. Okay. However, when it sits on the shelf for a week or two, what happens is this cane sugar, i.e., sucrose, breaks down. Guess what the units are that compose cane sugar? Glucose and fructose. And so what you end up with is after 2 weeks, the Mexican Coke and the United States Coke, in terms of the glucose fructose levels, are actually about the same. Yeah. There's only about a 5% or so difference, and very likely you can't even taste the difference from that. So it's very, very, very similar in terms of that. Interestingly enough, Coca-Cola actually had like a holiday Coca-Cola they did with cane sugar, where they actually served it to Americans fresh. And so it actually had active cane sugar in it for most of that time. And people still can really tell. Which is pretty funny. If you ever taste, by the way, table sugar, cane sugar versus like fructose, they really don't taste that different. You're like, they're just one is if you eat the same amount of grams, the fructose would be sweeter, but that's kind of about it. Now, there is other sugars in these, and that's probably what you're actually tasting. So, yeah, after 2 weeks, not really a difference in those. Now, in terms of monosaccharides, ribose is probably one of the most important ones in terms of like actual function and doing stuff in your body. You may recognize this from ribonucleic acid, as in RNA, because this is the sugar backbone of RNA, ribonucleic acid. This right here being ribose. You may go, hey, how's that different from DNA? And that's because DNA, which is deoxyribonucleic acid, is going to be where you've lost the OH right there. See that? And so it is literally deoxy. We have lost the second OH. Okay. And so the actual name for this, by the way, would be D2 deoxyribose. They cut the 2 off in deoxyribonucleic acid for obvious reasons. It doesn't sound as catchy to say 2 deoxyribonucleic acid, does it? Yeah, 2 DNA. That gives you a whole different thought of what that is, doesn't it? Now, structurally, the only difference between those pentoses is, again, that second position, oxygen. Ribose is also in the vitamin riboflavin. It's one of the most important biological molecules. It shows up all over the place. ATP is actually, again, has ribose in it. So all over the place. Very, very common. Now, glucose and diabetes. So glucose levels in your bloods and cells are going to be strictly regulated by signaling hormones. When blood glucose levels rise after a meal, the hormone insulin signals are going to signal the cell to take up glucose. This should then break that glucose down for energy if you need the energy, but oftentimes it will store any of that excess glucose in the form of like glycogen. Okay? And so what's going to happen when you're fasting or sleeping, i.e. not eating, your blood sugar levels will start crashing, right? And you get tired, sleepy. Oh, this is too long. I can't go through chemistry anymore. I'm going to take a nap. Somebody tap his shoulder if he's actually napping. Nope. You got it? Is your fasting glucagon levels working okay? Yeah? Okay. Okay. So what you'll see is that when you're sleeping or fasting, you're going to have your glucagon. This is going to signal, typically the liver being the main storage of glycogen, to make glucose. It's then going to send that glucose through your bloodstream, and so your cells now have glucose to use and work with. Okay. The two most important cells that they're going to be targeting are going to be your brain, which is only uses glucose, and your heart, which primarily uses glucose. Okay. Now, now, first off, just for so everybody understands, like humans don't work perfectly. We tend to bob around quite a bit, actually, in terms of blood glucose levels. And so we typically range between like 80 and 120 most of the time, which is actually quite a bit of a range, isn't it? If you really think about that. I mean, that's actually a pretty large range. It's like 30% difference. So, however, this book is old. The book's figure is 10%. This has went up tremendously since this book was published, like exponentially since this book was published. We're in a bad. It's not good. And so the U.S. population, I forget what the most recent number. Has anybody seen the most recent number for diabetes? It keeps going up, and so I keep forgetting the number. That's the new one. If I remember correctly, it's closer to like 14, 15%, I want to say, but are you looking it up for me? I'd appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah. I'd rather give you guys a more recent number.
As of 2025, it's approximately 16%.
Higher than I remember, which is probably because I looked it up last year. It's bad. It's really bad. So 16% of the U.S. population as of 2025, right, has diabetes in the United States of America. Diabetes is characterized by prolonged periods of high blood sugar. The insulin signals to the cells is going to be compromised, and so your cells will not uptake that glucose and do what it's supposed to do with it. And so your blood sugar levels remain high, whereas your cells could be starving to death, and they don't fix it properly like they should. Now, in type 1 diabetes, the insulin production is low. Supplemental insulin is required, and so you can just give them supplemental insulin, and they just take it right before meals, and they're usually okay. Type 2 diabetes, on the other hand, the insulin signal is not received. This can be for a variety of reasons, but usually has to do with they've developed resistance to the insulin, and so they have a drastically reduced signal, not no signal. But some of them, they actually literally don't have the receptors to receive the signal, in which case insulin does absolutely nothing, and they can't take insulin to control it. However, oftentimes in these cases, up to 95% of these cases, the diabetes of this type 2, can be controlled with diet, exercise, weight loss, and a variety of medications. There's actually a whole variety of them. There is not currently a treatment for diabetes that actually cures it. However, I've seen 2 treatments that are very promising, that are very expensive and not currently tested properly. And so we'll see in the next like 10, 20 years. Okay. There's actually a few treatments that might work. Oh my God. I'd have to look this up to remember. But yes, one's genetics, one's, well, okay, so this is genetic if I remember correctly. Okay. And this one is rarely genetic, though you can actually be born without functional receptors. Yeah. Or reduced function receptors. So there is this one is genetic, and this one's typically. Yeah. What was I? I'm getting tired. Need more coffee. Oh, interesting little side note to this is that does anybody know what the single largest line item on the United States budget is? Diabetes. Yeah, it's the medical prices for diabetes. Everybody always thinks that we are not a taxpayer-funded medical system, but we actually have three of the largest taxpayer-funded medical systems in the world, which is the VA, Medicare, and Medicaid. And together, if you take those, add all the money up, they are $2.4 trillion a year. And then you divide by the entire population of the United States, you get $7,000 per capita. And that is the same that Sweden pays on its Medicare system, its medical system, which is all citizens of Sweden get medical. So we are actually paying the exact same amount. The reality is we are focusing in on groups that we consider to be disadvantaged or have more need. And then we spend tremendous amounts of money. Like if many of the conditions that are covered under Medicaid and Medicare would be not covered under most socialist medicine systems. They would say, sorry.
This might not even be relevant, but do you think that diabetes and everything's like the top taxpayer revenue we're talking about because of GLP-1s and how popular Ozempic is nowadays?
I actually think that's going to make okay. So it is very related. It's a good question. I'm honestly, I wish I could confidently answer it, but I don't think I can. I think that as long as we can drive down the costs of those, that they are going to solve a lot of this issue and a lot of medical issues in the United States, actually. They're going to be a huge thing as long as they're cheap.
But they're not.
They're not right now. They're getting really cheap really fast. And we need to make them insurance paid for. And honestly, I don't know why insurances won't pay for them. It reduces all the other costs are going to have to accrue from that person. But the big problem being that when people go off them, they usually regain all the weight.
Yeah, if they don't use them correctly.
Yeah, because they didn't change anything about their life habits.
One thing I just want to say is that a bottle of insulin, like other countries, is significantly cheaper.
It is.
And I don't know why.
Again, that is a complicated question, and it has a lot of factors. But there's two major factors that you can point to. If you're being generous to our medical system, then the factor that you'd have to point to is that our economy is so much more powerful. And so, if you were to talk about buying the same thing in an economy that is so strong, then it's going to be more expensive. But that doesn't account for it, if we're being honest. A lot of that has to do with. So I don't know if you guys know how our medical system actually works. Okay, I'm not going to go so far into it, but I'm going to give you enough of a taste that you're going to go, oh my God, this is fucked up. So how our medical system actually works is that our government actually highly regulates our hospitals to the degree that they spend more on the complying with regulation than they do all their doctors combined. Yeah. Yes. Same thing with the high schools and middle schools, by the way. They spend more on administrators than they do on teachers. Yeah. So very common factor and problem with the United States of America and a lot of different fields, actually. There's that factor, and then there's also a factor. So we do have what would be considered by most people one of, if not the safest medical system in the world. And we have, for the country of this size and the amount of money being splashed around, I mean, it's high quality overall. We have some of the lowest turnarounds in like the emergency rooms and stuff in the world. So there's that. But on the other hand, because of how our payment systems work, we have absolutely no actual economy in the hospital systems. So if you actually look, like, first off, you've never once probably said, hey, I'm going to shop around to a different hospital, right? So, like, partially it's all of our faults, right? I tried it once. It's a lot of work, and I didn't do it. I'm going to be honest. So I'm just as guilty. The other part of that being that the way that actual billing happens is that the hospital does it first, doesn't have to put out a price for it, and then charges you whatever they think they're going to do. Oftentimes at a premium that's negotiated by the insurances. These insurances largely do not have a reason to negotiate these down because that's been subdivided, and they have taxpayer money that actually gets splashed in to help them out when they overspend. On top of that, the organizations that make drugs in the United States get direct tax rebates. And so what they end up getting is the government directly just gives them money. Not for the medicine, not for providing something, literally just. And so, like, this was really bad if you look at the one that was Biden that he just did a little while ago. Like, he got the insulin price down quite a bit. But part of that negotiation, he just handed over money for not doing anything to these companies that produce insulin. So they don't even have to provide anything to get the money. Like, they just have to keep making insulin at some level. Not even a minimum level, nothing. Here's money. So, yeah.
Sorry, so this will be like
Mhm.
a lesson about it. But like, I was looking at a chart from 2018. And it's like back in 2018, it was like $100 per vial. And then Japan, next most expensive country, was at 15. That's just
A wild. Unforgivably. Yeah. Yeah, it is.